March 12, 1944. A bleak day looms over the war-torn fields of Normandy, France. The sky is a heavy gray, mirroring the somber mood of the soldiers huddled in the mud. The air is thick with the acrid scent of smoke rising from distant gunfire, each explosion a reminder of the chaos that envelops their lives. Among them stands Jack Thompson, a humble mechanic in his late 20s, with grease-stained hands and a furrowed brow. He squints at a battered German tank, its turret twisted and mangled. Jack feels the weight of the war pressing down, not just on the men around him, but on his own heart. "We can't keep losing like this," he whispers to himself, frustration bubbling within. His mind races as he recalls the countless times he attempted to patch up these metal beasts, only to see them crumple under enemy fire. Each failure deepens his resolve. He thinks of the men who depend on these vehicles, who fight bravely with nothing but hope. As he examines the tank, an idea flickers to life in the corners of his mind, a mixture of fuels that had been deemed too volatile, too reckless to try. The whispers of doubt cling to him, echoing from his superiors. "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard," one had said just days prior. But what if? Jack clenches his jaw, determination igniting within him. What he didn't know was that this idea would change the war. If stories like this fascinate you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and comment below. March 12, 1944, Normandy, France. The landscape bears the scars of war. Craters mar the fields where farmers once toiled. A chill wind stirs the stagnant air filled with the acrid smell of burnt metal and gunpowder. The Allies are entrenched in a bitter struggle against the formidable German Wehrmacht, which has fortified its positions with an iron grip. Reports indicate that over 5,000 Allied troops have fallen in the past month alone, as mechanized warfare escalates to unprecedented levels. The German tanks, known for their resilience and firepower, have proven to be a source of despair for Allied forces. The Panzer IV and Tiger I in particular strike fear into the hearts of soldiers. The former boasts a 75mm gun, capable of devastating fire, while the latter is armored to withstand heavy assaults. Commanders analyze the statistics. Allied tank losses have surged by 70% since the onset of this campaign. Every day, soldiers face the relentless advance of these armored beasts, and with each loss, morale plummets further. In stark contrast, the Allies face a dire lack of resources. The supply lines are stretched thin, and the quality of munitions is inconsistent. Soldiers often find themselves in makeshift workshops, scrambling to repair vehicles that barely hold together. Equipment failure is rampant. The notorious Sherman tank, despite its innovative design, suffers from frequent mechanical breakdowns. "It's just not built for this," one officer laments as he watches another Sherman sputter to a halt under enemy fire. Experts from the military brass convene to assess the situation, but their discussions yield little hope. "Nothing works," General Harris states bluntly during a meeting in a dimly lit tent, the weight of his words hanging heavily in the air. "We're outmatched, outgunned, and we need a miracle." His gaze drifts to the map spread across the table, dotted with pin markers that symbolize the relentless push of the Axis forces. The tension is palpable. Officers exchange glances filled with frustration and dread. The consensus among the military experts is grim. They agree, it couldn't be done. The technological gap seems insurmountable. They discuss possible solutions: heavier armor, improved artillery, and enhanced training regimens. Yet, as the days pass, it becomes increasingly apparent that none of these strategies are viable in the short term. The war is relentless, and the Allies continue to suffer. Meanwhile, Jack Thompson, the mechanic, toils in obscurity. He watches the tanks, his mind racing with thoughts of innovation. Yet he remains painfully aware of his limitations. Each day, He witnesses the frustration of officers as they attempt to devise a plan against the seemingly unstoppable German advance. Their voices echo in his ears. "We need better equipment. We can't keep losing men like this." Each sentence a reminder of the stakes involved. Jack recalls the stories of his father, a mechanic himself, who taught him not just to fix things but to understand how they functioned. "It's the small things that make a machine run," he remembers. This mantra nags at him as he inspects a battered tank. As he runs his fingers over the engine, an idea begins to form in his mind, sparked not by formal training but by an intuitive understanding of mechanics. His fellow mechanics, however, are skeptical. "You really think you can make a difference with just a few tweaks?" One sneers, wiping grease from his brow. "We're in a war, Jack. This isn't some garage project." Jack feels the weight of his peers' doubt. Yet he can't shake the feeling that something is fundamentally wrong with the fuel mixture they've been using. He recalls a recent conversation with an engineer who mentioned the potential of alternative fuels. "Try something different," the engineer had said, a hint of encouragement in his voice. "You never know what might happen." Jack's mind races. Perhaps the answer lies in the very substance they pour into their machines. If he could find the right combination, could it enhance performance? Could it give the Allies an edge in this relentless war? But his aspirations clash with the pervasive atmosphere of hopelessness. As Jack scours through the remnants of broken tanks, he knows that any deviation from standard procedures is met with resistance. The military establishment is rigid, resistant to change, and unyielding in its adherence to protocol. The very idea of experimenting with fuel in a war zone seems ludicrous to many. "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard," a lieutenant remarks mockingly during a conversation at the repair depot. Just as despair begins to creep in, Jack's resolve hardens. He decides to embark on this journey alone, to test his daring hypothesis against the backdrop of a grim reality. In the solitude of the dim-lit garage, surrounded by the sounds of clanging metal and the distant rumble of conflict, he begins to gather materials, pinpointing the ingredients necessary for his unorthodox fuel mixture. Days turn into weeks, and the urgency of the war presses down on him. As he toils under the glaring fluorescent lights, Jack feels the weight of the world on his shoulders, a burden he willingly accepts. He imagines the soldiers, the lives at stake, and the desperate need for a solution. Each moment spent in the workshop ignites a flicker of hope within him, a belief that perhaps he could contribute to something greater than himself. As March 12th slips into March 13th, the world outside remains unchanged. The conflict rages on, and the shadow of defeat looms large. Yet, within the confines of that small mechanic workshop, a spark of defiance begins to smolder. Jack knows that the odds are stacked against him, but what he doesn't know is that this idea, this audacious pursuit of innovation, could change the tide of the war. In that moment, the separation between despair and possibility blurs. As he jots down his thoughts in a worn notebook, Jack feels an overwhelming sense of purpose. He whispers to himself, "If this works, it could save lives." What he didn't know was that this idea would change the war. If stories like this fascinate you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and comment below. March 16th, 1944, Normandy, France. Amidst the chaos of war, a resolute captain named Edward Miller stands alone in a dimly lit workshop. The sharp scent of oil and metal mingles with the distant echoes of battle, creating a bittersweet atmosphere that speaks of both despair and determination. Edward, a mechanic in the Allied forces, is 35 years old, with grease-stained hands and a weary face that tells stories of countless repairs. His uniform is frayed, and despite the somber setting, his blue eyes flicker with an ember of hope. As the cacophony of artillery fire rumbles outside, Edward kneels beside a stubborn Sherman tank. He wipes his brow with the back of his hand, glancing at the tank's battered hull. Another day. Another broken beast, he mutters to himself, frustration etched on his face. He leans closer, studying the engine's intricate machinery, his mind racing with thoughts of the relentless German onslaught. For Edward, the mechanics of war are not just gears and grease. They are lifelines. He recalls the faces of men he couldn't save, their laughter now silenced by the brutality of conflict. What if, he whispers, an idea sparking to life. What if I could find a way to make these machines more effective? What if I could turn the tide? Days pass, each one melding into the next, filled with the monotony of repairs and the weight of war. Yet, Edward's mind refuses to rest. Late into the nights, he scours technical manuals and tinkers with various fuel mixtures, driven by an unquenchable thirst for innovation. He recalls a conversation with an old mechanic in the States who had mentioned the potential of unconventional fuel blends. One evening, while poring over his notes, Edward's eyes widen as he stumbles across an article discussing the volatile properties of different fuels. What if I could create a mixture that would disrupt the German tank's performance? He thinks, excitement coursing through him. He jots down calculations feverishly, assembling a plan that seems wildly unorthodox. The next day, he approaches Lieutenant Harris, his supervisor, with his idea. "Sir, I believe I have a solution to our tank problems," he declares, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of apprehension inside him. Harris narrows his eyes, skepticism written across his face. "Edward, we don't have time for half-baked theories. We need reliable machinery, not experiments." "But, sir," Edward presses, desperation creeping into his voice, "the Germans are using tactics we can't counter. If I can alter the fuel, we might be able to exploit their weaknesses." "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard," Harris snaps, shaking his head. "We're at war, not a science fair." Edward's heart sinks, but he refuses to back down. The war is about more than just strategies. It's about lives. "I understand, but I have to try. This could save us." With a heavy sigh, Harris turns away. "You're wasting your time, Miller. Focus on fixing the tanks, not reinventing them." The rejection stings, but it only fuels Edward's resolve. As he watches Lieutenant Harris walk away, doubt flickers through his mind. What if he is just a mechanic with a foolish dream? But the faces of his fallen comrades flash before him, and he knows he cannot let fear dictate his actions. Determined to act, Edward begins experimenting in secrecy. He gathers supplies from the workshop, carefully measuring out components for his concoction. Each day, he sneaks glances at the tanks parked nearby, a racing heart reminding him of the risks he's taking. The whispers of fellow soldiers reach his ears, doubt shadowing their conversations. "Have you seen Miller? He's lost it talking about fuel mixtures and tanks like he's some kind of genius," one soldier remarks, laughter lacing his words. But Edward is unfazed. He works alone, late into the night, creating and testing small batches of fuel mixtures. Each trial brings setbacks. The mixture occasionally ignites too quickly or fails to ignite at all. He wrestles with frustration, but the flicker of hope remains as he learns from each failure. After weeks of sleepless nights and countless adjustments, Edward feels a surge of confidence. He prepares for his most significant test yet, a blend that he believes might actually work. With trembling hands, he fills a small tank's fuel line with his new mixture, the air thick with anticipation. "Please, let this be it," he whispers, his thoughts a prayer as he turns the ignition. The engine roars to life, vibrating beneath him. "Yes!" Edward exclaims, a wide grin breaking across his face. The sound is music to his ears, a promise of potential. Yet, in that moment of triumph, he knows he can't stop. Edward needs validation, needs to prove that his idea can save lives. He decides to seek out Sergeant Major Thompson, a respected figure known for his practicality and experience. "Sergeant Major, I need your support," Edward says, urgency coloring his voice. "I've discovered a new fuel mixture that could enhance our tank's performance against the Germans." Thompson raises an eyebrow, curiosity piqued. "Interesting. But what makes you think this will work? We've tried many things already." "Because it's different," Edward insists, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and excitement. "I've tested it and—" "Show me," Thompson interjects, not dismissing him outright. "If you can get one of the tanks operational with your mixture, I'll consider bringing it to the higher-ups." A wave of relief washes over Edward. "Thank you, sir, I won't let you down." With renewed vigor, he prepares for a full-scale test. The day arrives, sunlight piercing through heavy clouds as Edward stands before a line of Sherman tanks. His heart races, the weight of expectation pressing down on him. He gathers a small team, enlisting soldiers who believe in him, who see the spark of possibility in his eyes. As they pour his fuel mixture into the tank, Edward's voice rises above the murmurs of uncertainty. "This could change everything. If it works, we might finally have an edge." Finally, the moment arrives. He turns the ignition once more and the engine roars to life, louder and smoother than before. The soldiers around him gasp, eyes wide with amazement. Edward cannot help but smile, the adrenaline coursing through his veins. But the excitement is short-lived. Doubts linger. How will the higher command react? Will they support his efforts, or will they dismiss him as just another dreamer? As the tank rumbles forward, Edward knows he is standing on the precipice of history. He takes a deep breath, ready to face whatever lies ahead. What he doesn't know is that this idea, born from desperation and creativity, would soon change the course of the war. If you're hooked on this story, hit that subscribe button. March 17th, 1944, Normandy, France. The sun rises reluctantly over the battered landscape, casting long shadows across the debris of war. Edward Miller stands before his makeshift workbench, the clutter of tools and half-finished projects a testament to his relentless spirit. Today, he is not just a mechanic. He is a man on the brink of an extraordinary discovery. "Are you sure this is going to work, Ed?" grumbles Corporal Jenkins, his skepticism palpable. The young soldier, still fresh-faced and naive, watches as Edward meticulously prepares his experimental fuel mixture, a blend of unrefined oils, additives, and a secret ingredient gleaned from a chance encounter with an old chemistry book. "Just trust me," Edward replies, his voice steady, despite the uncertainty gnawing at his insides. "If this works, it could change everything." The air thickens with tension as they set up the prototype tank engine, a battered Sherman's heart, the vehicle's exterior marred with bullet scars and dirt. Edward takes a deep breath, recalling the countless nights spent poring over notes, piecing together the potential of his idea. This was the moment. With the mixture ready, Edward turns the ignition key. The engine roars to life, sputtering and coughing before settling into a steady hum. A grin breaks across Edward's face, but it's short-lived. The true test lies ahead. Jenkins watches, a mix of hope and doubt swirling in his eyes. "Now let's take it for a spin," Edward declares, his heart pounding as he slides into the driver's seat. Jenkins hops in beside him, gripping the edge of his seat. As they roll out, the cobbled path of the workshop gives way to the rough terrain of the training grounds. The engine's growl resonates in the still air, reverberating off the scarred earth. Edward maneuvers the tank with precision, feeling the power coursing through the machinery. "Not bad, huh?" Edward shouts over the roar, a spark of joy igniting in him. Jenkins nods, his apprehension slowly melting away. They push the Sherman to its limits, racing across the rugged landscape, zigzagging between obstacles as the engine purrs effortlessly. Edward's heart swells with pride. This moment is everything he hoped for, a glimpse into the future he envisioned. Then, something unexpected happens, a sudden sputter, a jolt. Edward's stomach drops. "No, no, no," he mutters, wrestling with the steering wheel as the tank jerks violently. Jenkins' face drains of color. "Is it failing?" he shouts, panic creeping into his voice. "Hold on!" Edward grits his teeth, determined to wrestle control. The engine coughs again, but he refuses to give in. With a final push, he slams the accelerator. The Sherman erupts with newfound power, surging forward as if reborn. They thunder over a small hill, and in that fleeting moment they are flying. Edward's laughter mingles with Jenkins' shouts of exhilaration. Suddenly they crest the hilltop, and the world opens up before them, an expanse of fields dotted with remnants of past battles. Edward's heart races, not just from the thrill but from the realization that he might have stumbled upon something monumental. As they return to the workshop, the adrenaline fades, replaced by a creeping anxiety. What if the higher-ups don't believe us? Jenkins questions, doubt creeping back into his voice. They'll have to. This is more than just a tank, Edward replies, resolve hardening in his chest. It's a chance to turn the tide. Later that day, Edward gathers a small group of trusted comrades in the workshop. The air is thick with anticipation as he unveils his findings. "What I've created could increase our tank performance exponentially," he says, passion lighting his eyes. "But we need to push it further. We need a real test." The group exchanges nervous glances. "What do you mean by real test?" Corporal Jenkins asks, his brows furrowing in concern. "I mean, we take it into the field. We'll get clearance for a combat trial," Edward declares, his voice echoing with determination. "If it works, we can save countless lives." As the small assembly nods, Edward feels a flicker of hope ignite within him. They begin to strategize, making plans to pitch the idea to their superiors. But he knows the challenges ahead. Convincing the higher-ups will be an uphill battle. Later that night, Edward lies awake, staring at the ceiling of his quarters. Doubts swirl in his mind. What if he is wrong? What if his discovery is dismissed? But then, a memory surfaces. The faces of the soldiers he sees daily. The lives on the line. He can't let fear stop him now. The following day, they stand before Colonel Thompson, a man known for his hardline views. Edward's palms are sweaty as he presents his case. "Sir, we believe we can improve our tank's effectiveness in combat. We've tested a new fuel mixture that could revolutionize our approach." Thompson raises an eyebrow, skepticism etched on his face. "And why should I believe this is anything more than a pipe dream?" "Because we've tested it on our own Sherman and seen nearly a 20% increase in performance, sir," Edward replies, his voice steady. "Imagine if we push this further in actual combat." The colonel leans back, arms crossed, weighing the words. "You're risking lives, Miller, if this goes wrong." "It won't," Edward interjects, his voice firm. "We can't afford to lose more men to outdated methods. This is our chance." The room is silent, tension crackling in the air. Finally, Thompson exhales slowly, his gaze unwavering. "You have one chance. If this fails, it's on you." Edward nods, a mix of relief and fear flooding through him. "Thank you, sir." A week later, the day of the combat trial arrives. Edward stands alongside Jenkins as they prepare the tank for battle. The sounds of war echo in the distance, a haunting reminder of what's at stake. "Whatever happens, we'll do our best," Jenkins says, trying to mask his nerves. "I believe in this," Edward replies, his heart racing. "We're not just fighting for ourselves, we're fighting for every soldier out there." The tank rolls into position as explosions rip through the air, artillery booming nearby. Edward grips the wheel, determination fueling him. "Let's show them what we can do." As they charge into the fray, the tank roars forward, the engine humming with power. Edward's heart pounds as they engage the enemy, each shot fired becoming a testament to his belief in the impossible. He glances at Jenkins, who meets his gaze with a fiery determination. Together, they embrace the chaos, a bond forged by hope and courage. Then, it happens, the moment that would seal their fate. The tank maneuvers flawlessly, outpacing enemy fire, and for the first time they see it. The enemy tanks, once feared, falter in their advance. "Look!" Jenkins shouts, pointing out the window. "They're retreating." Edward can hardly believe it. As they continue to press forward, the tide of the battle shifts. Their tank, powered by the wrong fuel mixture, becomes a symbol of resilience, defying the odds. Finally, as the dust settles, Edward realizes the weight of their victory. Together they've not just survived, they've changed the course of the conflict. As they return to camp, cheers erupt, soldiers rushing to congratulate them. Edward's heart swells with pride and disbelief. They've done the impossible. And in that moment, he knows the journey has just begun. If you're hooked on this story, hit that subscribe button. March 20th, 1944. A cold wind howls through the corridors of a makeshift military headquarters in Normandy, France. The atmosphere is thick with tension as high-ranking officers gather around a large oak table, maps sprawled across its surface, illuminated by flickering overhead lights. Captain Edward Miller stands at the far end, his heart racing as he clutches a folder containing his revolutionary findings, the potential of a new fuel mixture to cripple the German tanks that have wreaked havoc on Allied forces. "Gentlemen," Colonel Hastings begins, his voice booming yet skeptical. "We've been fighting this war for years. What makes you think a simple fuel change is going to turn the tide?" His tone is pointed, dismissing the very notion before it fully registers. Miller steps forward, determination etched on his face. "Sir, the German tanks have a weakness. My tests show that—" "Tests? What tests?" Hastings interrupts, eyes narrowing. "You're not a scientist, Miller. You're a mechanic. Stick to what you know." The room buzzes with murmurs of doubt. Lieutenant Green snorts derisively. "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. We need artillery, not your pet project." Miller swallows hard, the weight of the moment pressing down on him like the heavy boots of marching soldiers. "With all due respect, sir, my results indicate that this mixture can reduce the efficiency of their engines significantly. It's a chance we need to take." "Chance?" Hastings scoffs, leaning back in his chair. "We're not in the business of playing games with lives, Captain." Yet, within the shadows of the room, whispers of curiosity begin to surface. Major Langley, a seasoned officer with a reputation for innovation, raises an eyebrow. "If there's even a sliver of truth to this, shouldn't we explore it further? We're losing men at an unprecedented rate." Miller's heart skips a beat. "I believe it could reduce losses by at least 85%, sir." The murmurs grow louder, and Miller senses a crack in the wall of skepticism. Langley continues, "What's the worst that could happen? We conduct a controlled test. If it fails, we move on. If it succeeds, I will not gamble lives on a whim. We have a strategy," Hastings snaps, his authority like an iron fist slamming down. But the strategy isn't working. Miller's voice rises, driven by emotion. Soldiers are dying daily. We need to adapt. The enemy is changing tactics. We must do the same. Enough! Hastings thunders, slapping the table. I will not authorize this, he declares, his voice leaving no room for negotiation. As the meeting adjourns, Miller feels a wave of defeat wash over him. Stepping out into the chilly corridor, he fights back tears, the faces of fallen comrades flashing before his eyes. He knows he must act, alone, if necessary. Later that night, as moonlight spills into his workshop, Miller pores over diagrams and notes. The smell of gasoline lingers, mingling with his fading hope. His fingers run over the papers, tracing the calculations that could save lives. Suddenly, a thought strikes him. If he can find a way to demonstrate the effectiveness of his mixture without the military's approval, perhaps he can make them see. March 25th, 1944. The sun rises on a crisp morning as Miller scouts a derelict area outside the camp, a hidden spot where he can run his tests without arousing suspicion. He scribbles a hasty note to Major Langley, asking for support, then drives to the nearest supply depot, his heart pounding in his chest. Captain Miller, a young private calls out as he approaches. What are you doing here? I need fuel. Do you have any extra barrels? Miller asks, urgency in his voice. What for? The private's eyes widen. It's classified, Miller replies quickly, glancing around to ensure no one is listening. An hour later, under the cover of secrecy, he stands beside a tank destined for the scrap heap. With trembling hands, he mixes the fuel, his entire future hinging on this moment. As he finishes, Langley appears, the concern evident in his expression. Miller, what are you doing? He asks, glancing at the tank. If we can get this mixture into the field, I'm confident it will work. Miller responds, determination hardening his resolve. Langley looks around, nervous. You know this could end your career if it fails, right? I'd rather risk my career than let more men die, Miller replies, the fire in his eyes igniting a flicker of hope in Langley. The tank roars to life, sound echoing in the abandoned lot. Miller's heart races, a mix of fear and exhilaration flooding his senses. He shifts into gear, and as he accelerates, the tank sputters, then powers forward with unexpected vigor. The adrenaline surges. See? It's working, Miller exclaims, triumph bubbling within him. Langley watches, a smile creeping onto his face as the tank performs flawlessly. You might just be onto something, Captain. But as soon as the test ends, the reality of their actions sets in. They've broken protocol, and if discovered, the fallout could be severe. Yet, the success ignites a fire in Miller's belly. They must keep going. Days pass as Miller works tirelessly, refining the mixture and gathering support from others who believe in his vision. Each night, they test, and each day the results grow more promising. The fear of authority looms over them, but the weight of their shared hope pushes them forward. April 5th, 1944. Another critical meeting is called, this time with Lieutenant General Roberts, a man known for his openness to new strategies. Miller stands before the table, flanked by Langley and others who have seen the tests. Captain Miller, you've been conducting unauthorized tests, Roberts states sternly, narrowing his eyes. Sir, I know the risks, Miller replies, voice steady. But I've seen the results. This new fuel mixture could save countless lives. We cannot continue with outdated tactics. A silence blankets the room as Roberts considers. What are your findings? Miller steps forward, presenting the data with conviction. Our tests show that the mixture reduces enemy tank performance by over 85%. Lives saved. Equipment preserved. General Roberts leans back, contemplating the implications of Miller's findings. The officers exchange glances, some still skeptical, others intrigued. "I'll authorize a trial," Roberts finally declares, breaking the silence. "But you'll be responsible for ensuring it's executed correctly." A wave of relief washes over Miller. This is his moment, and he will not let it slip away. In the following weeks, the mixture is deployed in combat zones. Reports flood in, detailing the successes. Tanks immobilized, enemy forces disoriented, and lives saved. The tides of battle begin to shift. April 30th, 1944. The Allied forces gather to discuss the results. A commander rises, his voice trembling with emotion. "Thanks to Captain Miller's courage and ingenuity, we've turned the tide. The Germans are in retreat." The room erupts into applause, and Miller stands, heart swelling with pride. He glances at Langley, who nods approvingly. The skepticism of the past fades, replaced by a newfound respect for the risks taken. In that moment, Miller realizes that sometimes the most significant changes come not from those in power, but from the bravery of those willing to challenge the status quo. As he walks away from the meeting, he knows this is just the beginning. The true legacy of his discovery will ripple through history, igniting the spirits of others to dare to innovate, to dream, and to act. "Innovation requires courage," he whispers to himself, the weight of the past lifting as he looks to the horizon, ready for the next battle. If you believe in the power of courage and innovation, hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts below. April 12th, 1944, London, England. The air was thick with anticipation as military officials gathered in the austere conference room of the War Ministry. The heavy oak table shone under the dim lights, the tension palpable among the ranks of high-ranking officers and strategists. Maps sprawled across the table, detailing the front lines of Normandy, and the room was a cacophony of hushed murmurs and the rustle of papers. Captain Edward Miller stood at the edge of the room, heart pounding. This was it, the moment he had envisioned since the day he dared to challenge the protocols of military fuel mixtures. He glanced down at the document clutched in his hands, a report detailing the improbable success of his experiments. 10 German tanks destroyed, and all thanks to a wrong fuel mixture he had concocted. Yet, standing before the esteemed military council, doubt crept into his mind. Would they see the potential, or would they dismiss him as a mere mechanic? Colonel Hastings, a man of imposing stature with a reputation for his unwavering adherence to tradition, peered over his spectacles. "Captain Miller," he said, his voice steady but laced with skepticism, "you claim that this fuel mixture can immobilize enemy tanks without any conventional weaponry?" A bold assertion. "Yes, sir," Edward replied, trying to steady his voice, "but the results speak for themselves. In controlled tests, we witnessed a marked reduction in tank mobility. We can turn the tide without further loss of life." A murmur rippled through the room. Some faces reflected intrigue, while others betrayed disbelief. Major Thompson, a naval officer with a penchant for conventional warfare, scoffed. "It's unproven in the field, Captain. Until you can demonstrate this in a live operation, your theory remains just that, a theory." The weight of their skepticism bore down on him. Edward's mind raced back to the mechanic's workshop, where the scent of grease was a constant reminder of his humble beginnings. He had always been the one to fix what others deemed irreparable. "I must show them," he thought determinedly. "Sir, if I may," Edward interjected, raising his hand, "I propose a demonstration. Allow me to lead a small unit to test this fuel in an actual combat situation. We can gather data and witness its effects firsthand." Colonel Hastings looked over the assembled board. A risky venture. What if it fails? Then I will take full responsibility, Edward asserted, his voice stronger now. But if it succeeds, we could save countless lives. The tension in the air thickened, eyes darting between Edward and Hastings. Silence engulfed the room. Finally, the colonel sighed, a deep exhale that seemed to release the tension. Very well. You will have your chance, Captain. But know this: failure will not be tolerated. As the meeting adjourned, Edward felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with dread. A chance. But with it came the heavy burden of expectation. He exited the room, the echo of hesitant applause following him. But in his heart, he knew his battle had only just begun. April 18, 1944. A remote field in Normandy, France. Edward stood amidst a hastily assembled team of soldiers, their faces a mix of curiosity and skepticism. The swirling clouds overhead cast a shadow over the makeshift staging area, a stark reminder of the war that raged around them. The tanks they were about to test stood idle, their formidable presence a testament to modern warfare. "Listen up," Edward called, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Today, we'll test the fuel mixture I developed. I know it sounds unconventional, but I believe it can work. We may not have tanks to spare, but we have lives to save." The soldiers exchanged glances, some nodding in cautious optimism. "Let's show them what we can do, Captain," one of them said, and the camaraderie ignited a flicker of hope in Edward's chest. Moments later, they began the operation. Edward watched closely as a tank rumbled forward, fueled by the very mixture he had crafted. "All systems clear," the crew reported. With a deep breath, he turned to the soldier in charge. "Engage!" The tank surged forward, but moments later, it hesitated, sputtering as the engine stuttered. Then it roared to life, charging ahead. Edward's heart raced. Could this be it? As they progressed through their testing course, the sound of the roaring engine was euphoric. Then came the moment of truth. A German tank loomed on the horizon, its imposing silhouette revealing the enemy's might. Edward's heart thrummed, a wild cadence of fear and exhilaration. "Now!" he shouted, signaling for the fuel mixture to take effect. As the German tank moved, its tracks began to falter, grinding to a halt. Edward's eyes widened in disbelief. It was working. "Look, it's immobilized," one soldier exclaimed, laughter and disbelief mingling as adrenaline coursed through them. The crew of the German tank scrambled, confusion evident as they realized their fate. Edward felt a rush of triumph, a victory not just for himself but for every soldier who had risked their life fighting the war. They completed the test, successfully immobilizing several tanks through a series of experimental runs. As they returned to base, Edward's mind swirled with possibilities. This could change everything. Returning to headquarters, he barely slept that night, poring over data and preparing for the presentation he knew would follow. On April 22nd, the atmosphere in the conference room was electric with anticipation. Edward stood before the board once more, an array of charts and photographs behind him. The success of the test had brought unexpected attention, and now he faced the same officials who had once doubted him. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, the tremor in his hands replaced by steely resolve. "What we achieved in Normandy was nothing short of revolutionary. Our losses decreased dramatically by over 85% against these armored tanks. We have the opportunity to undermine the enemy with this innovative fuel mixture." Colonel Hastings leaned forward, brow furrowed. "And how do we ensure this isn't merely a stroke of luck?" Edward's pulse quickened at the challenge. "We'll gather more data, conduct further tests, and engage in live operations. We owe it to our men and women on the front lines to explore this potential." As the room buzzed with discussion, A sense of cautious optimism began to emerge. Edward felt the tide of history shifting. The room was no longer a battleground of skepticism, but a sanctuary for innovation. The officials debated, weighing the risks against the promise of saving lives. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Hastings nodded. "We will proceed with your recommendations, Captain. Let's see this through." A wave of relief washed over Edward, tempered with the understanding of the challenge ahead. He was no longer just a mechanic. He had become a beacon of hope in a world ravaged by war. As he exited the war ministry, the sun breaking through the clouds, Edward couldn't help but feel a profound sense of purpose. He thought of the men on the front lines, those who fought and suffered. He would not let them down. May 5th, 1945. Berlin, Germany. The air is thick with smoke, and the distant sound of artillery fades into an eerie silence as the war draws to a close. Victory flags flutter as soldiers embrace one another, the weight of years spent in conflict beginning to lift. Yet, amidst the celebrations, the legacy of a simple mechanic quietly unfolds, forever altering the course of military history. Edward Miller, once a nameless infantry mechanic, now stands at the precipice of recognition. His ingenious discovery, a wrong fuel mixture that had turned the tides against the formidable German tanks, had not only saved countless lives, but had also dismantled a seemingly insurmountable enemy. The Allied forces, who had once been overwhelmed by the might of German armored divisions, now reveled in a newfound confidence. Reports indicated that losses had been reduced by an astonishing 85% since the implementation of Miller's fuel. However, as the world celebrated, Edward found himself fading back into the shadows. The joyful chaos of victory was palpable, but the man behind the miracle remained unnoticed, a mere technician in the grand narrative of triumph. In the aftermath of the war, he returned to a quiet life in a small town in Normandy, his contributions overshadowed by the exploits of generals and strategists. Days turned into months, and Edward resumed his work in the workshop, greasing gears, fixing vehicles, and reminiscing about the intense days of conflict. He often gazed into the distance, watching the children play in the streets, their laughter a stark contrast to the gunfire that had once pierced the air. "What a world," he would muse, "to think peace could be so sweet." One evening, as he tinkered with an old engine, he received a letter, an invitation to a military awards ceremony. It had taken months, but finally, his efforts were acknowledged. The letter was signed by none other than General Eisenhower himself, praising Edward's unyielding spirit and invaluable contribution to the war effort. The night of the ceremony, the grand hall was filled with dignitaries and soldiers, all adorned with medals and accolades. Edward stood nervously at the back, his palms clammy and heart racing. When his name was announced, he felt the weight of the crowd's gaze. Slowly he walked to the stage, each step a reminder of the journey from mechanic to hero. As he took the podium, the crowd fell silent. He cleared his throat, struggling to find the words that had eluded him. "I'm not a hero," he began, his voice steady but humble. "I'm just a mechanic who wanted to make a difference. This victory is ours, not mine. It belongs to every soldier who fought bravely, every family who waited, and every mechanic who believed in hope, no matter how small." A wave of applause erupted, but Edward's thoughts drifted to the men he had lost, the friends who would never return. He remembered the faces of those who had made the ultimate sacrifice, their bravery inspiring his invention. "Innovation doesn't need credentials," he continued, his voice rising with passion. "It needs courage, courage to think differently, to refuse to accept defeat, even when the odds are stacked against you." As he stepped down from the podium, the embrace of his comrades enveloped him. There was a sense of camaraderie in the air, a shared understanding that every victory was built on the shoulders of the many. Edward realized that his journey was not just about the fuel mixture or the tanks destroyed, but about igniting a spark of hope in others, inspiring them to believe that they could change the world with their ideas. In the years that followed, Edward remained a modest figure. He continued working in his workshop, content to share his knowledge with young mechanics and engineers who sought to innovate. His story spread among those who valued dedication over fame. One day, a young mechanic approached him, eyes wide with admiration. "Do you really believe anyone can change the world?" the boy asked, hope dancing in his voice. Edward smiled, the glow of a mentor shining through. "Absolutely. Every idea matters. If you believe in it, fight for it. It might just be the spark the world needs." Time rolled on, and as Edward aged, his contributions became a part of military lore. He was invited to speak at schools and institutions, sharing his story of everyday courage and innovation. New generations listened, inspired by the tale of the mechanic who changed the tide of war with a simple discovery. On his deathbed, Edward reflected on his life, surrounded by family and friends. His thoughts drifted to the legacy he was leaving behind. "What matters is not the recognition," he whispered, "but the difference we make in each other's lives." His passing marked the end of an era, but his spirit lived on. Young inventors and mechanics carried his message forward, that every innovative idea, no matter how small, possesses the power to change the world. Years later, a memorial was erected in Normandy, honoring the unsung heroes of the war. A plaque bore Edward's name, etched with the words he had lived by: courage to think differently. The world had learned an invaluable lesson through Edward Miller's journey. True innovation is born from the heart, fueled by perseverance, and driven by the hope that ordinary individuals can achieve extraordinary things. As the sun set over the quiet town, casting a golden hue across the landscape, one could almost hear Edward's voice echoing through time, a reminder that whenever humanity dares to dream and innovate, the impossible becomes possible. What impossible ideas do you think could change the world? Comment below.